I think when you ask the members, why do you keep coming back? It's a safe place. That's a surprising thing, but a safe place for business owners. When we have problems, we can't always go to our banks. We can't even go to our accountants,
No unicorns, no brands, just hardworking people who built their business from the ground up, sharing their experience so others can learn. Presented by Larissa Feeney from Connemara. This is Real Business Conversations.
Hello, my name is Larissa Feeney. I am CEO and founder at Connemara Finance and Business Services. Our guest today is the ultimate accelerator for ambition. He's the man behind the Smácht philosophy, the proven discipline of success that has been the driving force behind some incredible achievements. He's not just talking theory. Pádraic's framework has helped extreme athletes conquer the Atlantic, high-level sports teams win national titles, and entrepreneurs secure the EY Entrepreneur of the Year award. He's one of Ireland's most sought-after business mentors and the author of insightful books like The Midas Power. We're going to discuss how to structure your efforts for exponential growth, the power you gain by committing to a mastermind group, and the practical steps needed to move from merely hoping for success to making it absolutely inevitable. Please join me in welcoming the exceptional speaker and business strategist, Pádraic Ó Máille. Welcome, Pádraic.
Good to be here, Larissa.
I'm delighted to have you. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you.
Pádraic, I have so much to ask you, right? But I think I'd love to start first with Smácht. If you wouldn't tell me where the Smácht philosophy came from and what does it mean?
I think it was the 5th of February 2011.
Oh, that's very exact.
Yeah, they were really bad times, Larissa. You would have remembered them. We were coming out of the back of the worst economic recession that businesses had ever come across. And I had 12 really scarified business owners in a room in the Castle Oaks Hotel in Castleconnell in Limerick. Remember it vividly. And I went around the room and I asked a question I'll come back to later. I asked them what they were worried about. And almost every one of them said they were worried about survival. It was nothing about growing businesses or thriving. They were just worried about hanging out through this recession. And then I went around the table again and I asked them, what was the one characteristic they thought they needed more than anything else to survive? And almost every person said discipline. And they would say discipline and they would give me a dirty look. And I always remember it ended with a guy called Polly O'Connell, not the rugby player. Polly is, he's MD at Crocora Mills in Limerick. Brilliant company. And Polly gave me the filthy look after saying he needed discipline. And I said, what's the story, Polly? He said, Pádraic, we know we need discipline. The only problem is we hate the sound of the word. And everybody laughed. And I kind of felt I was going to lose the dressing room. And Polly said, look, he said, by any chance, would there be an Irish word for discipline? And there actually is. And it's very much a Connemara word. And my uncle would say, my dad had died literally before I was born, but I had an uncle who used to take me fishing. And he was very good to me. He was a fluent Irish speaker. And he arrived into my mum when I was about 7 or 8. He said, if you give me Pádraic for the weekend, I'll put Smácht on his fishing. And Smácht does mean discipline, but it's altogether a richer word than the English word. It also means control or mastery. And you'd have often heard Micheál Murthy speaking about her Joe Canning Smáchtar and Lero. He controlled the ball or he mastered it. And everybody burst out laughing and they said, yeah, what we need to survive the recession is Smácht. And we laughed at it. But I said, well, what sort of disciplines do you need? Do you need a 5-year plan? And they said, Pádraic, we may not be in business in 5 weeks, maybe a monthly plan. And that's where we began, Larissa, without any plan. Smácht was born that day. And the discipline we agreed was we would meet once a month for half day. The members would agree certain actions that they would take, and they would come back to the group and they would discuss them and be a little bit accountable or say where they had problems with it. And by the end of that year, including in Donegal, where you're based out of, I think we had 12 groups going around the country. It was the busiest I ever was. And so many of those members are still with us, would you believe, ever since 2011. So that's where Smácht came from.
And would you have called it a mastermind at that time? Because today you would call it a mastermind, I think.
No, we did not. Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. That evolved. Every time we'd meet, we'd add to our little body of knowledge. In fact, the acronym Smácht began to stand for S was for strategy. M was for, depended on the group, for measurement. A was for attitude. C was for cash or communications. H was for human beings. And T was either for the team, depending on the company, or time. We had a little acronym for it, yeah. But no, a mastermind, we discovered many years, I would say maybe 2 years afterwards, that there's some really famous masterminds. That there have been masterminds, crying out loud. The 12 apostles, the disciples, they were ancient forms of masterminds. The Vagabonds was a really famous American mastermind that included Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Randolph, who was the president of the United States, Harvey Firewall, who came up with the tires. These people met 4 times a year, mostly informally. They would meet for lunches or drinks. They went on holidays. In fact, there was the story of their car broke down. Now, their car went off the road, the 4 of them. This farmer arrived in a sort of a belted up car, and he was dragging them out. Somebody said, you know, that man there actually made the car, and that other man there, he designed the tires for the car, and that other man designed the lights. And the farmer looked at them with a long white beard and he said, and I'm Santa Claus. They were actually the repeat. So, Larissa, no, we did not call it a mastermind. I do now. I think Napoleon Hill, there's a book up behind me there, and in a wonderful book called Think and Grow Rich. And he said, whenever 2 or more minds come together, a third better mind is formed. And we all know that. It's so true. I mean, our mums would have said, a problem shared is a problem halved. You know you're infinitely wiser. And I've seen you operate this way with your own team. You know, you are so much better with a diversity of minds coming together. We did not call it that for at least 2 years, I'd say.
If I have no exposure to masterminds, if I've never heard of the concept, why, as a business owner, would I join a mastermind? Because it costs money. And there's loads of them around the country, and some cost a lot of money, right? And others not so much, right? But it is an investment in terms of money. It's an investment in terms of time. So over all the years that you've been running them, what feedback have you got from business owners? Why do they keep coming back? What's in it for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And with every respect, Larissa, it's a question I asked myself and have asked, you know, ad nauseum almost since 2011. I think when you ask the members, as I do every year, you know, why do you keep coming back? And these are really, really successful business people. The first one is it's a safe place. That's a surprising thing, but a safe place for business owners. You know, when we have problems, we can't always go to our banks. We can't even go to our accountants, you know. Very often we can't take problems home with us, do you know? It's a really powerful dynamic to have a peer group of like business people. I would never have said that originally, but I think it's what most of my members say. The other thing, funnily enough, there's another book behind me there called Grow or Die. It was written by a very famous American journalist. And he tracked people who had, like myself, serious heart surgery. These were people who had bypassed surgery. I actually didn't have that. But what he discovered was that when they were admitted for their bypass surgery, they were absolutely thrilled. And they said, doctor, we will do anything never to have this happen again. Within 2 years, 98% of people who had bypassed surgery had reverted to their old habits, to their old fitness regimes, to their old diets. The 2% who actually succeeded in sticking with it were part of a mastermind group. And I think far better than any other statistic is that if you want to stick to your goals, have the accountability to go to a mastermind group. So one is the soft side, the other is the hard side. Accountability works, even though we may not like the word. I would say they're the 2 greatest reasons. The third that I'd probably add on is the loneliness component. It's lonely being in business on your own. I mean, I had a decision to make this morning. And I really had great difficulty with it. I was awake early. I was trying to go through it. It was one I couldn't share because it was with a Smácht member, and I couldn't go to my kind of Smácht groups on it. I would have loved 5 or 6 people to say, look, give me your opinion on this. Larissa, the other one was I was fortunate to work with Fergal Quinn when he owned the Super Quinn. He had 16 shops when I worked with him. He was the most phenomenal entrepreneur, the most phenomenal person. But when I reflect on what was it that he did focus groups on a non-going basis. I mean, I worked in a shop in Kilkenny, and first thing in the morning, he would arrive down from Dublin, he would arrive into the shop, and he would pack bags and pack customers' bags. And he would do that from 9 to 10. And what he was doing was actually listening. He was very subtly saying, well, Larissa, what do you like about this shop? And he'd listen. And what are some things we could improve? And then at 10 o'clock on the button, he would have a focus group with his staff, or his team, as he called them, and he would feed back the feedback he had got that morning, and he would elicit their feedback. It was a focus group. He was using his head. And then every Tuesday morning in those days, he had a formalized focus group with 14 customers. I remember them well. An old cassette tape recorder in the middle of a table, and these were customers. And he was literally just talking about what they liked and didn't like about his shop. And a very interesting thing for some of your viewers who might think this is just for business, many may not realize that Rory's cousin, Rory Quinn, who actually was leader of the Labour Party and a very fine government minister. And Rory did the exact same thing. Every month, he would have 8, 10, 12 people in off the street, i.e. ordinary people like ourselves, and he would ask them how they thought the country was being run, what could be done differently. Focus groups are, for my money, Larissa, they're a wonderful investment. They really, really are.
So the same applies then, the same principles apply to the mastermind group, the discipline of coming together, of sharing. There's a safety aspect as well, or element to it as well, isn't there? Like there's safety there because you made the point, there's things that you can't share with your spouse, with your team. And if you don't have, well, regardless actually of the size of your business, if you own it, then you're largely on your own for a lot of the decisions or some of the major decisions anyway. So having a safe space to share the challenges with and to hear other challenges, other people's challenges as well, especially if you're lucky enough to be in a group where there's business owners who are further along on their journey than you are, then you really have an opportunity to learn and to leapfrog in terms of your growth. You probably see that a lot, do you?
Yeah, absolutely see that. And, the funny thing that's evolved over the years, while they're ostensibly business masterminds, and the purpose is to help people improve in their businesses, I would say, Larissa, and you've been part of one for the last year almost, I would say a good 30% is involved in physical stroke health things. People saying, like this week, I'm sure you've seen the WhatsApp groups, breathing techniques. I tried this Pádraic breathing method. It's really helped my energy. It's helped me sleep at night. An awful lot of family things. One of the biggest things I'm proudest of, and you included, are people taking proactive holidays. I think you went on the continent with your kids this year, and so many people have talked about taking more quality time with their families. So that was a very pleasant surprise for me. I would say the business component is probably a third of it at this stage, if you were to reflect on the content of each Smácht session.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. And that was a surprise to me as well, I have to say. That was a surprise. And I suppose it points to the reality that in order to grow the business, you have to grow yourself. And there's an element of self-care and well-being there that is common to every individual, no matter what stage of business, That definitely surprised me too. Pádraic, I'm really interested in, your experience that you've had. You've coached obviously through Smácht since 2011, but before that, for many, many years, you would have helped business owners and worked with business owners on their journey. There will be many listeners to this podcast who are at different stages of their own journey. And I know that many of them will want to know, what are the characteristics of a successful business person that you've seen? And I know that you'll give examples of various business people that you worked with, but I'm really interested to learn what are the characteristics that we need to develop as business owners to reach our full potential?
Larissa, without a shadow of a doubt, I would say the first attribute of all the great people that I've worked with, they all had exceptionally high energy levels.
Okay.
They were all very physically fit and they worked extremely hard at it. We had a girl 3 weeks ago at a Smácht session and she was late to it. She arrived in holding her mobile phone. I upbraided her about 2 weeks afterwards and I said, you were a bit late for the Smácht session 2 weeks ago. We have a Smácht session every 2 weeks. And she said, my walk in the hills of Donegal in the morning with my good friend Alice is non-negotiable. That, dear listeners, was Larissa Feeney. And she said, it's non-negotiable even for Smácht. She really had a go at me and I loved it. That's a true story, isn't it, Larissa?
It is a true story, and it's absolutely the truth that the walk comes first. And if I had to miss Smácht or miss the walk, I would be missing Smácht, and that is a non-negotiable in my day, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And, I go to one other, probably the most inspirational person I've worked with. I think you might have mentioned EY, Entrepreneurs of the Year. Well, for me, Pádraic Ó Máille was a teacher before I even he taught me before we even got to work together. Well, I always remember I had Pádraic, I was chairman of the Galway Oyster Festival, and I had him as my guest of honor. And there were events on the Friday night, the Saturday, and the Sunday. And on the Friday night, we were in there, and he was the main man. And I went to pour him a glass of wine at the meal. And he said, no, Pádraic, no, I'm not having that. I says, go on, you'll have one, you're the guest of honor. And he said, no, I'll have a few with you tomorrow night, but I'm running in the morning. And I said, yeah, okay, but you can skip it this time. And he kind of got serious with me and he looked me in the eye and he said, at the time, well, he was CEO of Air Arden. He was an extremely busy person and working in loads of business, and he's a very giving person. He said, every Sunday night, I sit down to plan and map out my week. And the first 3 things that go into my diary are when I get a chance to work out. And he didn't spend a lot of time at it. It was about an hour. I did it many times with him. And he said, it so happens this week that the time that I could fit it in was, I think, 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. And he said, no, I will not drink tonight if I have to. And no more than you, Larissa, it was a non-negotiable. And I always remember Pádraic, and he's told the story publicly. He owned Air Arden, and there was a volcano up in Scandinavia, and his planes, and the planes are all around Northern Europe, they weren't allowed to fly for 6 weeks. And Pádraic's company was effectively, he had to put it into examinership. It was in a really difficult time. As it broke, he arrived home to his wife, Kathleen, and he explained, he said, look, this could be bad news. If we can't fly our planes, cash flow dries up and blah, blah, blah. And she said, what are you going, as any good wife would say, what are you going to do about it? And without thinking much, Pádraic said, he said, Táimich marathon, which is Irish for I'm going to run a marathon. He was in his late 30s at the time. He was 39. And she said, and what's that going to do? How's that going to save your business? And he always said, I realized in that really difficult time that I needed massive mental energy to actually survive. I'd never ran a marathon, but I knew if I started practicing for a marathon, it would up his energy. And thanks be to God, the thing went off after 6 weeks. He got back to business. He would later say that running that marathon probably saved his life because he did actually have a heart attack later on. So you asked me, what are the characteristics of successful business people? Without a shadow of a doubt, I would say physical fitness. And I say that, Larissa, because it really doesn't cost €1 to get physically fit. For your listeners today, you can begin the journey of physical fitness today. It's really, really powerful. And I tell this story in almost all my talks. And I was in Castlebar earlier this year. And I spoke to Cree. Cree would be a West of Ireland-based brilliant organisation for stroke victims and heart victims. And all the people I was talking to, they'd all come through really serious illness. So I finished my talk, and this very elderly man who had had a series, he should have been dead 20 years ago, he says, come with me. And he brought me up to the first floor in this wonderful complex in Castlebar. And he said, there it is. And it was Andy Morden, the great Mayo footballer and the current Mayo manager. His gym, a state-of-the-art gym, is up there. And outside the gym is a big, beautiful kind of circular sign and it says, movement changes everything. Movement changes everything. And I believe that's really true. If you're feeling down, get out for a walk, get out there. I would say to business people, get out and take a break at the old 11s, as my mother would call them,
Yeah.
at lunchtime. If you go back to Fergal Quinn again, Fergal Quinn's father always said, take the lift. Yeah. Fergal would take a bus and he would get off a stop before the shop that he was actually going to. So number one, without a shadow of a doubt, Larissa, physical exercise is wonderful.
I love that, and I do agree with you. What's number two?
Well, number two is these all begin with P's, and it's as simple as people.
Okay.
There's a brilliant book there by a wonderful American, sadly he's passed on, a wonderful man called Jim Rohn. And Jim Rohn was the guy who came up with the phrase, you are the average of the 5 people you're surrounded by most of the time, or you're influenced by most of the time. I always remember reading that in one of those books, and it kind of grabbed me by the throat. And just to give the veracity on it, it was in a hotel in Limerick. I was staying the night. I was given a session the next day. And I tell this story, but it was my first big break in kind of on the speaking circuit. And I was doing a job with Limerick Chamber of Commerce on the following morning. And I was so nervous. I was in my late 20s. I was new to it. I wasn't married at the time. I'm an only child. And my only kind of blood relation was my mother. And at 7 o'clock, I rang her. And she was a bit shocked because I normally wouldn't have rung at 7. And she said, what's wrong? What's wrong? Are you all right? I said, yeah, man, I'm fine. And she said, where are you? And I said, I'm in Limerick. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm giving a talk. She said, who are you giving the talk to? Oh, I said, to some very senior business people in Limerick. And she says, well, what are you giving the talk on? And I said, time management, ma. I'd actually been trained in time management. And she said, you giving a talk on time management? She said, look at the state of your bedroom. It said pits. And she says, how long do you have to talk for? And I said, well, it's from 9 to 1. And she was much quicker than I was. And she said, 4 hours. She said, what happens if you dry up? What happens if you forget your lines? What happens if they don't like it? Negative after negative. And I have to be honest, Larissa, I put the phone down on my mum and I struggled in and I managed to get through the 4 hours. And anyway, it went quite well. However, I knew I had a serious chat and I got into the car and I drove to Galway. I had a chat with my mum and I says, look at Ma, it's like this. I said, I'm trying to make a career in the speaking industry. And I will never, ever, ever, ever ring you again prior to a gig, a working gig. And she got into a right huff and she says, oh, my only son's never going to speak to me again. I said, that's not true. And funny, she only passed away. She was 93 when she passed away. And I, in the good days, would have done maybe 200 gigs a year. Every single time, no matter if I was in America or Russia or wherever, I would ring her and say, look at it. It was brilliant. Or it wasn't. They didn't like it or they didn't laugh at my jokes. But Larissa, I learned a huge point. I often ask people at my courses, why did my mum, who was a really positive person herself, she was a very formidable business lady, why did my mum put me down that day? And people in groups say, oh, she was worried about you. Not at all. My mum, it shows you the power of the mind. When my mother heard I was speaking in front of 25 senior business people, she immediately put herself in my position. Does this make sense? And she had never done this. And she absolutely panicked, so she did. And unfortunately, Larissa, no more than a mobile phone, I can ring one of my kids in Sydney or Chicago. Fear transfers, yeah. My mum transferred her fear to me. And Rowan says in his book, you have 3 strategies with people. Number 1 is completely sever your relationship with negative people. I got to be awful careful saying this. I don't know the man, but I used to say to people in my courses, don't listen to Joe Duffy. Don't listen to Joe Duffy at 3 o'clock in the evening. And the reason why I never listened to him much, but it was all about problems. Does that make sense? And, you know, it was kind of this ongoing bitching and it was a really popular program. So sever your contacts. There are some people who will just bring you down. And I know we're speaking largely to a business audience. That includes customers, by the way. There are some customers that you can stand in your head and you won't please them and they'll be yakking and whatever. Number 2 is to do what I did with my mum. You need to limit your association with certain people. I limited my association with my mum until after I was finished the work. And it worked a treat. The third strategy with respect to people is there are some people you need to expand your association with. Yeah. I.e., I think podcasts like this give us an opportunity to listen and learn from other people who have enlightened minds or who have enlightened experiences in business. So that's in terms of people. 3 great strategies. I would add a few to that, and I do it on my flip chart at my gigs. So beware of the negative people. Obviously, get around positive people.
Yeah.
There's another category, 2 categories I'd add to that, Larissa. One is get around funny people. Get around people who make you laugh. I used to say, and the HR people have had an awful go at me, I would say, if 2 people are really equal, give the job to the person with their sense of humor. And people say, oh, that's being too I think sense of humor is brilliant because as a society, we've got awfully serious. Are you with me?
Yeah.
I think somebody who can make others laugh, you can imagine the power of somebody funny in a team environment. It's brilliant. Get around funny people. And I was saying this in Athlone one day. You got to be careful. But anyhow, I was giving the speech in Athlone, and this poor old Jivan in the back row in a real Westmeath actually says, what happens if you don't know anyone who's funny? And I says, oh God, how am I going to get out of this? But luckily, a guy beside him gave him a dig, and he said, I prescribed 3 hours of Father Ted. And you know something, Larissa? There are certain TV programs that can make you laugh and uplift you. Does that make sense? There are an awful lot of them that can bring you down. There's my spiel on people.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you're absolutely right. And like the negativity that we can be surrounded with without even knowing that, if you actually think about the people who you spend your day with, the people that you spend your week with, and you distill it down to the 5 people that's around you most of the time, and think about the conversations you have and what you're talking about. And that will tell you why if your mindset isn't the way it should be, there's a possibility it's because of what you're listening to and the conversations that you're having. That can be difficult or easy depending on the people that are negative, right? But one of the things that can counter that is something like a mastermind group. Because even if you're not naturally surrounded by the type of people that you need to be if you're growing a business, that can help. Because sometimes what we find is our families adapt the similar approach as your mum did. They want you to be safe. And as you say, they feel it rather than, they're not you, so they don't know what you feel, but they feel that they wouldn't be able to do it. Therefore, they can understand why you would be able to or want to. And we feel this especially as women, Pádraic, right? Because our mothers tell us and our grandmothers tell us, sure, what would you want to be doing that for? That's what we hear a lot of. Would you not just? So there's a fear. So if we're surrounded by, or we have exposure to, not necessarily every day, but we have exposure to people who have done it or who have even attempted to do it or even talk about doing it, who open up your mind to what's possible. That can be massively, massively helpful. So people, yes, I agree with you. In all areas, by the way, of your business and your life.
Sorry, Larissa, you've reminded me, there was, I got into trouble once. I was doing a start your own business program in Ennis. And I always remember it. It was a really lively session, and with this group of people, and I got them really motivated about starting their business. And then at the end, I says, look it, I said, please, if you don't mind, don't share. We got them to work through their new idea. And I said, don't share it with your loved ones when you go home. And there was a lot of people who said, oh, I share everything with my partner and we have no secrets. And the reason I used to suggest that was for exactly what you said, because they're the ones who care the most about you. They don't want to see you fail. They said that won't work and don't do that. You're only going to set yourself up for a fall. It's not being deceptive, but I would always say, wait till you get really strong legs under your business before you start sharing it all. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, number 3. So we have physical fitness, number 1, and we have people, number 2. And the third characteristic of highly successful business people.
Yeah. In the old days, I used to call it attitude, and that was the A in Smácht in the early days. But I changed it to P for psychology.
Okay.
And it's basically the way we think, Larissa. And, you would certainly see that from Smácht. I think our self-talk is absolutely huge. I don't know, the psychologists argue, but 60,000 thoughts a day go between our head. Most of them random. We're not actually aware of them. And it's right up behind me again. I was in my early 20s, 22. I had a lovely uncle called Paddy Gleason, and he left a book beside my bed. And it was called The Power of Positive Thinking by a man called Norman Vincent Peale. And I have to say, I'd been brought up in kind of the Catholic Ireland of the 60s and 70s, which was quite negative, yeah? And certainly the religious component was. I mean, my mother's one was, you'll go to hell, definitely, purgatory if you don't cop on it. It was that almost kind of punitive type of religion. And I read this book, and this book gave a positive psychology. And it was very spiritual to this day, phrases like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthened me. That was a completely different God to the one that I've been brought up with in Galway. Even phrases from the Bible like, what things soever you desire, when you pray, believe that you receive them and you shall have them. Like, talk about an abundance mantra. Absolutely brilliant from the Bible. I could quote, for I have not come that you should have fear, but of power and of love and abundance. My eyes were opened to positive psychology. It was probably what put me on the route of kind of speaking and mentoring. And I kind of felt if I could impart a bit of positive psychology, I could really help business people. And I do believe that, yeah.
Yeah. Did you say that was your uncle that gave you that book?
Yeah.
Wow.
He denied that he gave it to me. He would say he left it inadvertently there. It had an absolutely exponential 10x impact on my attitude. Yeah.
Yeah.
I put it out there. I won't say the tricks, but the techniques. I would use them with a lot of athletes, a lot of rugby players. But the tips and strategies that I often would use are 3 letters or 2 words. I am, or IAM. Yeah, IAM. I heard it first with Muhammad Ali. Michael Parkinson was interviewing, and Parkinson said, I don't know if you were the greatest, he said, when you said you were the greatest. And Ali gave him a filthy look and he said, I said I was the greatest long before I ever was the greatest. And I love that. So my audience say to me again, but he was faking it. He was actually telling his mind a lie. And yes, he was. And I do think, Larissa, there is value in faking it. I really, really do. We've kind of got to see ourselves in the role or the position before it actually sometimes happens. Yeah. And so that is why I do this exercise. I would have done it with you guys when we wake up in the morning. And this is an exercise all of your listeners can use. Monitor or track your actual attitude. Some mornings we'll feel really energized. Yeah. Other mornings like today, I've had Zooms all day. I kind of got up and said, oh, wow. So I was inclined to have a negative I am. Does that make sense? I'm a little bit overwhelmed. I went back to a G1 there today. I get to make 6 great presentations today, including hopefully a great podcast with Larissa. You can switch your self-talk instantly in the morning. The other great psychological component is gratitude. And you and I have often talked about this, particularly at night. What are you grateful for the day? And no matter what a lousy day or horrible show we've gone through, there are always things you can be grateful for. And it's extremely positive, powerful self-talk. So that's my psychology without getting hung up in the weeds of it. But it's really, really important.
Yeah. It's good for yourself, but it's also really good to understand or to attempt to understand people, the people that are around you, the people in number 2. I heard a politician, no, he wasn't a politician. I heard a commentator say recently that, in his opinion, all politicians should do a degree in psychology so that they can understand people. And I would extend that to business. Maybe we don't need to do a degree in psychology, but we do need to have an understanding of people and why they think the way they think and why they behave the way they behave and what are the reasons behind certain behaviours in our own lives and in our businesses. So yes, I agree with psychology and I agree with the negative self-talk and the positive self-talk and the faking it till you're making it bit. Yeah, I do think that it's important to visualize something. If you're not quite there yet, if you can see yourself there, you're on the path.
Yeah.
That's half the battle.
And on that one, Larissa, there's another great book that I really recommend to your readers. It's Atomic Habits by James Clear. And right in the very early pages, he distinguishes between you and I. We come from a background of outcome-based goals. As an accountant, you obviously want to help your clients get certain outcomes with their revenue and their profits and all of that. Most of my life, I was kind of working with people on outcome-based goals. James Clear in his book makes a lovely distinction between outcome-based goals and identity-based goals. The simple example he gives is, I've been there myself, is smoking. For anyone who's ever tried to give up cigarettes. Now listen to the two versions of the self-talk. Yeah, I have given up cigarettes. That is outcome-based, yeah? Whereas this one is, I am a non-smoker. That is identity-based. I am a non-smoker now. I absolutely see myself. I've been in all sorts of establishments after loads of drink, but I'm a non-smoker. I believe it. It's my identity. My kids believe that about me. I think it's hugely, hugely powerful psychology. Lovely, lovely. Even on another Smácht this morning, I heard it. Yeah, what do you want to be more so than what do you want to do or have? Yeah, what type of person do you want to be? And you can go through the alphabet again. I want to be attractive. I want to be bold. I want to be courageous. I want to be daring. Go from A down to Z. And it's fascinating how you can actually improve your self-esteem and your self-image.
You actually asked me to do an exercise some time ago, probably close to 2 years ago now, where you said to me, you need to write down what Larissa looks like in the future. So, how Larissa behaves, how Larissa shows up. Even, what Larissa dresses like, how she speaks, what she thinks, what she believes. And then you're visualizing it because, you mightn't see yourself as that person today. You could put a date on it or not, but it's the future version of you. And then you will work towards that. If you keep telling yourself that that's the person you are, then that's the person you will be. It absolutely makes sense to me, yeah. And it does work. It really works.
It does work. I can remember having Pádraic Ó Máille in as a speaker at a Smácht session, a big Smácht more once. And he got us all, there were about 180 of us. I had to buy the envelopes and the stamps. And he got everyone to write a letter to themselves. And I kept the letters and I posted them 1 year later. It was a future self vision. So this was the way they wanted to be. But they wrote it in the present tense. So yeah, I am very confident, having grown sales by 28% this year, whatever it might be. And we still talk about that exercise in Smácht. It was actually putting Smácht on getting your future self. It's big talk in psychology circles at the moment, yeah. But really, really powerful, Larissa. It is a great exercise.
Okay, so that's 3: physical fitness, people, and psychology. Do you have a 4th?
Oh, I do. This is a real negative one. I've got 5 of them actually.
Okay.
This is real negative.
Okay.
Yeah. My colleagues in the coaching industry say, never mention that word, Pádraic. It's problems. But I love problems. I really do. And I think once again, and I'm conscious of the age of your 3 lads, I think this should be thought absolutely, certainly at secondary school level. We're taught all sorts of stuff on maths and English and science and biology. We're taught precious little about confronting and solving problems. Brilliant book written back in probably the 70s, The Road Less Traveled, by a psychiatrist called Michael Scott Peck. And I can remember it being recommended to me, and I remember looking at the first line, and the first line was, "Life is difficult." I said, good God, I'm not going to read 300 pages of a book this negative. But in the next sentence, Peck goes on to say, once you confront the fact that life is difficult and accept it, you can begin moving on so you can. What he actually does say on that first page again is the solution to life's problems is one word. It's actually discipline. Had Scott Peck been brought up in Ireland, he would have known that was actually Smácht. Yeah, I have over the years, Larissa, I won't say I developed it, but I read a wonderful book by Dale Carnegie called, now he was the one who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that's a cracker.
Another great book, yeah.
Yeah, but he wrote one that wasn't as well known called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Now, the examples are so dated at the moment, but the principles are enduring and timeless. He had a brilliant business. He had, I think I have the book there. Yeah, I mean, The Art of Public Speaking. As a young man, what I mean by young man, in his late 20s, he opened up schools all over America teaching public speaking. He was on an absolute winner. And then the Great Recession hit, the Great Depression, and all the schools were closed. And he ended up owing a fortune. And he ended up sick in hospital. A doctor confronted him. He said, look at Mr. Carnegie, it's like this. If you don't learn how to deal with worry, you will be dead in 1 year. And Carnegie said, yeah, but you're a medic. You know nothing about business. You know nothing about owing so much money and no way back. And the doctor shared with him these simple questions. He said, what you've got to do, Mr. Carnegie, is you got to get your notebook. You got to get your biro. And you got to write down exactly, one, what are you worried about? Number one, what are you worried about? And don't do it in your head. Don't do it with me. Write it out in detail. Okay. Number two is, what are the facts behind your worry? That's hugely important. It's a job your organization would do really well with people, is unearthing the facts. Really, really important, because I can remember back in the Depression years, the guy came into me one week, and like that, I asked him, I said, what are you worried about? He said, what am I worried about? Negative equity. He says, I haven't a clue what I owe. And I turned professional. I says, okay, come back to me next week and I'll talk to you again when you know exactly what you owe. And he arrived in with a smile on his face the next week. And he says, I owe an awful lot more than I thought. And I said, what are you smiling about? Well, he says, I didn't know last week. I know now. It's cathartic in itself to confront it. The third question, the first four questions I'm going to give you are negative. The third question is, what is the worst case scenario? And I can remember asking this man, I said, what is the worst case scenario? He said, the worst case scenario is the bank might close everything on me. And he says, I will lose my house on the hill. He's one of the most phenomenal houses on the hill in Galway. And I asked him the fourth question. I said, can you live with this? Could you live with this? And he said, I was brought up in a terraced house. I didn't know any better. I would have no problem going back to a terraced house. He said, I don't know, however, about my wife or children. And he knew he could go back there. Does that make sense? In his head, he had confronted the brutal facts. He knew he could go back there. So those are the four negatively disposed questions. The two crackers, the two game changers are, I asked him, number 5, what can you do about it? And like that, he said, I can go to every financial institution I know. I can put it on the table. This is the story. This is my plan. This is what you'll get back from it. And he came up with about 20 other things he could do. There were certain properties he could offload. There were certain other things he could do. And I said, final question, number 6, what will you do about it? He said, before this day is over, I will have rang every financial institution I know and I will have leveled up with them. I'm not saying it solved the problem there and then and there, Larissa, but that man walked out of my office with a plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That man walked out of my office having confronted the brutal facts. He was actually able to confront his wife and family that night and said, here's the story. I don't think they're going to take the house. However, they may, and it may well mean we go back to a terraced house. And if we do, and we'll stay there for a year or 2 years and we'll get out of it again. And I can assure you, I often tell the man that story and he absolutely came out of it. So problems are good. Problems, right? There's a guy called Ryan Holiday who's written a book, The Obstacle is the Way. And what he's really saying is the obstacles are problems. They're there to show you the way, so they are.
Yeah.
So stop trying to dodge them or get around them. Go straight into them and confront them.
And I say a lot, that, we need to know what the problem is. If we know what the problem is, we can come up with a plan to fix it. That's the reality. And it's not until you identify what the problem is that you can understand how to get to the other side of it, or you can put in place a plan, and then you can bring people together to figure out what the solution is. But yeah, you're right. Okay, so, and what's number 5?
Number 5 was its presentation skills. Okay. And I'll tell you why. You asked me about successful people. The difference between somebody with a great idea or a great product or a great service is not how good the product or the idea or service is. It's how well they present it. And great successful people, they have worked on their presentation skills. And I got a personal story. I call it my 2C to 6A story. My mum, to her credit, decided to send me to boarding school when I was 11. Well, when I did the entrance exam when I was 11. And she sent me down to the Cistercians in Rossgrey. And the idea was that I was an only kid. My dad was dead. And it would give me an independence. And it was a really inspired decision. The only problem was there was an entrance exam to do. In those days in Rossgrey, they took 60 people. So I think maybe 80 sat the exam. And didn't I make the cut? I actually got accepted to Rossgrey and I was absolutely over the moon. And I had a little break the first night. I met 2 lads, one from Galway and his cousin, Colm O'Connor and Jim O'Connor. Colm was from Galway. So all of a sudden I had a little peer. I had 2 friends and it helped us get through the worst night in a boarding school, which is that opening night. And I actually enjoyed it hugely because I'd met 2 really sound guys and everything was going swimmingly until after breakfast the next day. So we went for breakfast and the fun was good and everyone was nice to us because we were new. And Father Peter, who was the president, Father Peter Garvey, he said, now go out and see which class you've been assigned to. Anyway, I was out and I wasn't really looking. And Jim says, oh, wow, I'm in the A class. Colm said, Shay, I didn't make that. He said, but I'm in the B class. I said, does anyone see my name up there, lads? I'm in the A class or the B class, you know? And I was actually in the C class. It was at 12 years of age, a seminal moment in my life. And I always remember it was great fun. The guys in the C class, we thought we were the biggest dossers in the school, and we were. The prefects thought we were the dossers, and they rewarded us. Sadly, so did the teachers think we were the dossers, yeah? And they treated us accordingly. In other words, we had to be managed as opposed to being taught or educated. And I can remember thinking after about a week, Larissa, I got to make a decision here, yeah? I got to get out of it. And I went to that same man, Father Peter Garvey, beautiful, wonderful man. And I says, Father Peter, I want to get out of the C class. And he kind of laughed. He says, Pádraic, where do you want to go? Oh, I says, the B class will do me fine. I want to be in with my friend Colm O'Connor in the B class. And very kindly, he said, Pádraic, we didn't pull the names out of the hat to get into the A, B, or C classes. They were actually determined based on your results from the entrance exam. And Pádraic, you came 55th out of 60 in the entrance exam. And the way it transpired was, I think I was in the C class very much on merit, he said. Anyway, I walked out and I was devastated. But here's probably where Smácht was sown. I went back in for 2 other days and I said, come on, Father, give me a go. Please do. I'll really work hard if I get into the B class. And he didn't give in to me. To his credit, about 2 days afterwards, he called me and he said, Pádraic, would you try out for Irish debating on Saturday morning? Now, bear, this was kind of the day off. And I says, right, Father. Well, he said, just let's see how good you'd be at Irish. Now, it was a little bit of luck, Larissa, because I had good Irish, yeah?
Okay.
And anyway, nobody from the C class or indeed the B class tried out for Irish debating on the Saturday, but all the guys in the A class did. And I always remember, he's a great friend of mine to this day, Brendan O'Rourke was the Irish teacher. And he didn't know me because he was teaching the A class, the B class. But he said, you're the guy from the C class. I've heard about you. And he gave me a motion. He gave everyone a motion. We were given 30 minutes to prepare it. And it was Níl an Rá gan an Smácht. Níl an Rá gan an Smácht. There's no success without discipline. Now, that's not a great motion for a 12-year-old kid to get. But I was so hungry to make an impression that I spoke like a person inspired in a half an hour. And in fairness, Father Peter had said it to Brendan. He said, occasionally academic results can go skew ways, yeah? Give this a fella and see is he worth his chance in the B class. I got moved up to the B class. It was the quickest move ever, Larissa. I was moved up within about 2.5 weeks, yeah? Fortunately, Brendan taught Irish debating. And I got on the debating team. I got on the junior debating team in my first year. Long story short, I ended up in the A class. I ended up getting super results in Irish and English. And it had nothing to do with intelligence. IQ, as we were always told, yeah. It had to do with the fact that I got in with a bunch of people who enjoyed debating and presenting. I got 1,000 times more experience at that than most of my colleagues, or certainly in other schools. It is by far and away in business the greatest skill set that we can have. So I would put presentation skills. You look at the superb people and they work so refinedly on their presentation skills. Says I'm making a total muck of that, but
No, you're absolutely right. And you said it at the beginning. It's not necessarily those that are the best at what they do, but it's those that are the best at telling you that they're the best that they can be. It's marketing. It's essentially how you market your business, how you market yourself, the business brand, its personal brand today in this world of social media that we live in. That's essentially what you're talking about whenever you say presentation. Yes, there's the getting up and the talking, of course, but they go hand in hand. And the lesson around the importance of marketing is one that all business owners learn early, or they should learn early. The importance of investing in brand, investing in marketing, and knowing where your customers are and what they want to hear, and putting yourself in front of your customers, which is what you did as a 12-year-old child. You put yourself in front of those people who made the decision about your future. And that's what you did. And that's what we as business owners have to do all the time. It's a hard one, though, if you're not that way inclined anyway.
Yeah, and I have a solution on that, Larissa.
Oh?
And it's not my idea. It was Dale Carnegie's idea. Carnegie started teaching basic communication skills. Yeah. What he discovered was that, people's technical abilities improved as a result of it. What absolutely amazed him was their confidence level went through the roof. Yeah. When people had to come together to make a presentation in front of a group, yes, it's a little bit scary. Yes, it's a little bit overwhelming. But your confidence absolutely, it absolutely shines. I was lucky in my early 20s to be part of an organization called Junior Chamber Ireland. I subsequently became a senator of JC's International. And what they did was exactly what happened to me in Roscrea. They had debates. And we would debate, so Galway would debate Dublin and Letterkenny had a great chapter, Cork, Limerick. We went all over the country. We won some, we lost some. But I'll tell you, not alone did our technical ability improve, but our confidence went through the roof. I saw people coming in, seriously, I kid you not, with pronounced stammers, yeah? And we always supported them. And they would get up, they'd make a presentation. People knew they had a stammer, but by God, did they love them. They absolutely, it transformed their lives. And I'm going to revert in 2026 to bringing, when I thought of it, it's a mastermind group, yeah? I'm going to bring groups of 8 to 10 people together to actually present on business topics, yeah? It's twofold. It's one, the technical, but mostly it's about the confidence, and it's the polish you get from doing it over and over and over and over again. It's the $10,000 one.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Okay, so just to summarize then, the 5 attributes or characteristics of successful people that you have seen in all of your many years of mentoring them and coaching them and joining them on their journey are commitment to physical fitness, commitment to understanding that you have to be surrounded by the best of people, or that the mindsets of the people that you surround yourself with impact your mindset and will have an impact on the results that you see in your business and indeed in life. The importance of psychology, the importance of problems, which is a great one. I do like that one, okay? Because you are right. You know, we all have problems. Life is difficult, and it's not that it's difficult, it's how you deal with it that makes a difference. Presentation skills or marketing yourself, your business, your brand. I love it. Now, you have given us loads of content and value there. Pádraic, thank you. I have one final question, because you've given so many examples of great books, and indeed I can see all the books behind you, and you're a great man for giving recommendations on books. If I was to go away and download one book right now, what's the book I should download?
Yeah, and you know, and I'm not dodging your question, and I will give you an answer, Larissa. A lot depends on what you're facing in your life for your business at the time, you know? I would say the most profound influence on me was Norman Vincent Peale's book, because it helped me deal with psychology. Now, I won't go over the books that I've dealt with. I'm going to go back to a cracking book here, and it's a book by Spencer Johnson called Who Moved My Cheese? It's a parable. It's a little parable about two mice and two kind of grown-up people. All of a sudden, they were all living really comfortably, and they had as much cheese as they wanted, until one morning they discovered there was no cheese. And the two mice said, okay, cheese is gone. Let's go looking for more cheese. Whereas the other two people were analytical and said, who took our cheese? And they got a little bit belligerent and they got a little bit upset. And it's a beautiful parable in the sense that we need always to be changing, Larissa. Yeah. Just do not assume that your cheese will be there forever. It's a beautiful you'll read the book in less than 60 minutes. Who Moved My Cheese by
Who Moved My Cheese?
By Dr. Spencer Johnson. And it's a beautiful book for every business to read. It's really encouraging, but it comes with a stark message. Yeah. You gotta be always looking for new cheese.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Pádraic Ó Máille, the acclaimed speaker, business mentor and founder of the Smácht philosophy. Thank you for sharing the discipline of success with us.
Thank you for listening to Real Business Conversations with Connemara. For more information on this episode, see the description area of this podcast or visit our website, connemara.com. Remember to press follow on your podcast player now so you'll get a brand new episode every single month. This podcast is produced by DustPod.io for Connemara Finance and Business Services.